Hello, everyone. I'm Natalie Martinez, NBC5 Chicago reporter, and welcome to our panel on using AI as a tool. As artificial intelligence continues to revolutionize various aspects of our lives, it is becoming increasingly important to understand how to leverage its power effectively. I know I recently used AI to plan and execute a personal project. It cut my workload pretty much in half. It made my life so much easier. We're going to talk about all these things that it can do for you professionally and personally. In today's session, we'll explore the practical applications of AI and learn how it can enhance our efficiency, our productivity, and creativity. So joining us today are our esteemed guests and panelists, Jasmine Sway, NBC News data journalist, using numbers and data to report on topics like housing, artificial intelligence, and climate. Also, you can give her a round of applause if you want. Also joining us all the way from Texas, Liam Andrew, technology lead at the American Journalism Project, working on tech and AI at a philanthropy dedicated to strengthening local nonprofit news. So we thank you both for being here. We thank you all for coming. We know that Amanda came all the way in from Georgia. We have a lot of people joining us virtually and in person. Thank you for doing that. Let's get right into it right now. Let's talk to you, Jasmine. Hopefully you're having a great day. How are you using AI in your day-to-day?
Oh, absolutely everywhere. So everything from sourcing to interviews, but then even wackier things like trying to create some, Chinese Midwestern fusion food, trying to teach my dog how to skateboard, crazy things like that. I think ultimately the common thread is, I want to understand something new, and this is a really, really nice way to step out of your own inertia and kind of get a new perspective.
Fabulous. We do want to get a new perspective all the time, right? Liam, let's toss it over to you. How about you? How do you use it in your day-to-day?
I wish I were teaching my dog to skateboard. Mostly, I'm learning to cook right now, and that's been a really valuable place to do it. And as long as I always check the facts and make sure I'm not burning anything, it's a really useful tool for that. That's probably the main place I'm using it.
So let's also talk about, Liam, we were going to level set here for the time being. What is an AI tool anyway? Let's talk about what that means. There's a lot of chatter these days about AI being used and introduced in the workplace, in school, where a lot of us are educators as well out here. Let's talk about this on a basic level. What does that mean?
Yeah, the term AI has been around for about 70 years, and I personally have never loved it. It's kind of a synonym now for algorithms or technology, but it's what we're using to talk about it. So what we're usually talking about is generative AI and large language models under that. That's all coming from a new architecture called transformers. Basically, it makes a computer's capacity for language a lot easier and better than it previously was. That's enabling language to become faster, cheaper, more accessible, adaptable. That's enabling it to advance really, really quickly. That's an exciting complement to what computers were already really good at, which was math and statistical analyses. So now that they have both math and language capability, they're still much better at reasoning on a level that seems human-like. So the current interface for that is usually like a chatbot or Q&A type format, of course. And so when companies are putting AI in their product set, it's often to add that interface. And that's fine, but what I'm really excited about is sort of the products that are going to be built with AI from the ground up. We haven't seen a lot of those yet, but there will be a lot more possibilities to come.
All right, thanks, Liam. Jasmine, what do you think of it as AI tools?
Well, if you ask marketers these days, basically everything is AI. I think for me, though, it's an attempt to capture some of what's happening in your brain and capture what humans can do on a regular basis. We're actually very capable of doing incredible things like walking, which I think a lot of us take for granted, or even the fact that trillions of photons are hitting your eye every moment of every day, and you're perceiving them. That's crazy. And so a lot of AI is an attempt to replicate even a fraction of that, and then harness it to do more complex things. And like Liam was talking about, like with generative AI, generating text that seems like something I could have believably written, that kind of thing.
So to your point, let's talk then about ways to harness that. How do you effectively use those AI tools? Liam, we'll send it back out there to you.
Sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of nitty gritty in utilizing AI. There's the price of it, there's its reliability, there's the data privacy aspect, which is really crucial. So it kind of depends on what you're doing with it. If it's a one-off experiment, you can try cutting edge tools. If it's something that you're building into a big production workflow, you probably want to stick with a known solution. But the way that I always encourage people to think about it is to try a few options and evaluate them. I think these tools are moving so fast and changing every day. So experts, even experts in books and everything, they're not going to know what is going to be good for your particular problem, and you're going to have to figure that out often yourself. And that's the way to get good with it, is just to get your hands dirty and try it.
Mix the human aspect in. Thanks, Liam. You, Jasmine, the specific AI tools to tackle the problems.
I think for me, it still begins with a question. I think that's always where you start. I've been saying to everyone, you know, like English is actually the new hottest programming language these days. And it's because like when I'm talking to GPT, it's still critical analysis, right? Like things are evolving so fast, that website, it will not look the same way in a year. But your ability to have a conversation and think critically and understand how to expand the surface area of a question, like that's eternal. That's not going to change. And no matter what tool I've used, whether it was ChatGPT, Claude, GeoSpy, some of the other tools we'll talk about later, it's always that questioning that is still incredibly important. So yeah, it always comes back to that.
Okay, we're going to now talk about some different AI tools specifically for journalists. Maybe some of you have heard about Otter AI. So we use it in the newsroom quite a bit. If there's a press conference and it goes more than 10 minutes, you know you'll see an Otter transcription. Incredibly useful. So let's talk to both Jasmine and Liam about how to use it. We've got a clip on how it works. For anyone who hasn't seen Otter, let's play a little bit of that so you can see.
That's all the speaker recording. Hey, Liam.
Hi, Ben. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
So that was actually from the conversation that we had weeks ago with Liam, and that was automatic. So let's talk to you, Liam, about some of those specific tools for journalists.
Otter is a really valuable tool. There's a number of other ones that are coming out as well. These transcription tools are getting better and better, and they're so valuable for journalists interviewing sources, or for just taking personal notes. What we're using it a lot for at HAB is for doing transcriptions of public meetings and meeting minutes and gatherings that we want to make sure are in our notes, if not on the record. So I think Otter is a really valuable one. There are others that are getting better at transcriptions for other languages like Spanish as well. These tools are just getting more and more valuable every day. So it's exciting to think about the possibilities.
What's the upside of using the Otter transcription, for example, rather than using Google Translates, for example?
Otter, I think, is particularly good at what is called diarization, identifying the speaker who is speaking. That's a really tough problem, or has been historically a really tough problem for language for language models. And so what it can do much better than these other tools is tell, like it was showing in that video clip. It can see who is speaking and what they're saying, and even if two people are talking kind of over one another, which certainly happens in plenty of meetings, that it's pretty good at identifying who is saying what and able to do that. So it's just the quality is higher than it's been. It can also identify specific terms or people's names and other things that can be very hard for traditional or past models to be able to do.
You also wanted to talk about Google Pinpoint rather. Google Pinpoint, walk us through what that is.
Sure. Google Pinpoint is a tool that comes out of Google's Journalist Studio, and it allows you to upload large sets of documents and extract information from them and connections between them. It can take words and turn them into entities. So for instance, OpenAI is no longer just a string of text. It's a private company. It's based in San Francisco. It's building a tool called ChatGPT. It's made deals with publishers like The Atlantic or Vox. So you get a high-level view of these connections and through lots of documents. The killer feature that I think it has, the best feature, is for extracting structured data out of documents that don't have structure or that have complicated structure. So for instance, a publisher in the Twin Cities, Sahan Journal, they fed it 180 PDFs of nonprofit tax documents from schools, and asked it for specific line items about independent contractors, that would have taken days for the reporters to pour through 180 PDFs manually. And with Pinpoint, it took them less than an hour. They found that $132 million were going to independent contractors from charter schools. The resulting story they published changed the law in Minnesota, so charter schools now have to follow a competitive bidding process. It's a really great example of using a tool like this for research assistance, and I think it's it's not perfect. Like all AI tools, it requires oversight, but it can be really, if you treat it as an assistant that gets you into the square one, then you can collaborate with it from there. It's really valuable.
Indeed, yes, and saves you so much time. We're going to take a virtual question from someone in our virtual audience who asks, for those new to AI, are there any prior skills or training needed in order to start learning? So we'll send that over to you, Jasmine.
Yeah, of course. So what I tell students is that you can start right now, and we often will work through ways to do just that. So for me, here's an example. Like I just bought an air fryer, and I'm a pretty decent cook on the stove, but I have no idea what that means, in air fryer world. So I was like, hey, I have this tofu recipe. What does that mean? How do I take the thing I make on the stove and now do it in an air fryer? And they'll modify it and be like, hey, you don't need as much cook time, or maybe you should spray it with oil, all around the surface, instead of just coating a pan. And I was like, wow, thanks for making me slightly more proficient at this. That's an example. With another student, I was like, hey, you're trying to figure out the best course schedule, right? Let's talk through that. What exactly do you want to learn? What job do you want to have? We can use, ChatGPT to kind of work through that, and then intelligently be like, hey, here are all the classes at Columbia, and I should take these 5, and in this order, and I have, 3 years left. So that's a kind of thing that you can do just right now. You could do, not literally right now, but maybe after, this summit is over.
All right. Thank you, Jasmine. And I just want to remind everybody out there, if you are attending virtually, you can go to the QR code, you can get on, you can ask your own questions, and we will do our best to squeeze them in here as well. In the meantime, Jasmine, we've got a pre-submitted question. This is from Margaret Fullwood from Dallas College. She's asking, I'd like to learn more about media outlets. Are they able to identify false content, some photos, false audio, things like that? So Jasmine, you also talked about reality defender, and that detects deepfakes, as I understand, correct? You want to talk about those?
Sure, yeah. So there are a couple tools out there, not more than a couple. It's a big industry, and it's growing by the day. So Reality Defender is one. There's Pindrop, which is not the same thing as Google Pinpoint. I believe 11 Labs has some kind of detection tool as well. But again, it comes down to your common sense and good judgment. So for me, something I hear on my team is hey, if you see something and your heart starts to race, you need to pause, for at least 5 minutes and think what does someone get out of putting this out there? And then from there, you can kind of start to use these tools to kind of answer that question and say hey, maybe there is a pattern in this audio that looks suspicious, or maybe there's something about this photo it's just not quite right. At the same time, those tools, they have their own faults, all right? So at NBC, we have a social news gathering team, and they're incredible. Honestly, they really know their stuff. They know what's normal for the field. They know what's normal for a video, what it should look like. And these tools don't. They basically have an understanding of the world that's limited to the data they're trained on. And in some cases, the data might be really old. There was a tool that we worked with for detecting audio deepfakes, and they had trained their model and benchmarked it on data from 2019, right? And we're in 2024. Fake audio samples have gotten much, much more sophisticated, and there's no way the 2019 data is representative of what's going on today. So again, I think good judgment is very, very important.
That's key. Thank you so much, Jasmine. Let's go to our studio audience. We now have a question. If you would introduce yourself, where you're from, go ahead with your question.
Hello, my name is Aya, and I attend Agnes Scott College. So as an applicant, I've noticed that more and more companies are using one-way interviews, and they're using AI to grade them. So I'm just curious, what other ways do you see AI being used in future hiring practices?
Maybe that's for Liam.
Sure, I think that's probably going to continue to be true. I know that there's plenty of document scanning that's been used by sort of proto-AI services in the past and will continue to be in the future. It's really to save the HR companies time. I know that I've spoken to the technology lead at Indeed, who has talked about always wanting to encourage these companies to have a human in the loop at all times. So there is certainly from these companies these platforms that are running these systems, they do not think that it's a replacement for being a good hirer of a good candidate. But I think it is saving them a lot of time at the outset, and then once they get past that first round, where the AI is doing the review, a little more of the review, then they'll have a human come in. I'm hopeful that that's going to continue to be true, but I think that we're going to keep seeing AI interviewers, continue to proliferate. I would encourage you to have some skepticism if you are only interacting with AI before you receive a job offer.
Very well, thanks, Liam. Jasmine, you want to chime in on that one?
Well, I feel like I can't speak to the particulars of hiring because I am not a recruiter and I would not, want to claim that. But I think probably it'll be in the form of some kind of summarization. I think it doesn't have to all be negative. You can also use it to understand, how to ask, someone that you are hiring better questions. You're like, hey, this person is a 24-year-old new grad who is from Chicago, Illinois. Like, what are some things they might have experienced? What are some activities they might enjoy? You can use it to build a better rapport with people, and that's kind of what I do when I interview people. It really helps you personalize things and step outside of your own world.
While we have you on this, and one of the things that you do know a lot about is GeoSpy. I think this is so cool, this geolocation tool that we have out there. Let's talk about what it does, but I also want to bring something. We have a really great example here of photo that our anchor, Tom Yamas, it was taken of him, if you want to bring it up. This is so cool. It actually accurately reported that this picture was taken in Lviv, Ukraine. From just putting that photo in. Talk to us about this, it's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So the model is taking, those photons in this photograph, right, the pixels, and saying like, hey, like that train has this kind of design, those tiles have this kind of structure, and that lamppost, like we'd only see that in Ukraine, so it can take all of these little cues and then help us figure out where, in the world something is happening. I think that is something that is really powerful and is important, when you're working on a story that's moving quickly. But again, I would always apply, your best judgment, because there are things that happen like, hey, this is in Ukraine, but it's not, recent. This is not a photo from 2024. It's from 2012. And that's not something these tools will catch, right? So I think it's really important to still, I sound like a broken record, but exercise your best judgment.
That's fair. Would you like to talk now to AI? We're talking about people probably familiar with ChatGPT, maybe Claude too. Jasmine, what are ways that you can use chatbots appropriately, effectively? Talk about those.
So my first rule is like, if I'm going to use this, it's usually something where creativity and vibes are much more important than being specific and right. So again, back to the Chinese Midwestern cuisine thing, because I'm obsessed with that right now, obviously. I'll be like, hey, give me like 10 to 15 recipes that blend, like Illinois culinary flair with Shanghai cooking, because that's where my mom is from and I love her. So yeah, shout out to you, Mom. Yeah. But like that's a good example, right? You're like, give me 10 to 15 of these, or maybe even 50. Like, let's write a whole cookbook. Why not? That's a good place. But if I was a doctor, I wouldn't be like, diagnose this patient for me, right? Because that is something that is really consequential. And I think this is a good way to kind of measure everything that you're doing when you work with ChatGPT. Like, what are the stakes here, right? And if they're low, feel free to go ahead and do whatever you want, as wacky as it might sound. It can be really powerful for that.
I'm going to ask both of you this question because I think it's something that can pertain to just about anybody who uses it, even randomly. What are both of your tips for getting the best answers from these bots with your prompts? So we're going to start with Liam on this one. Getting the best answers with your prompts.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this and certainly educate newsrooms on this. First one is to be clear and concise. Don't write in shorthand. If you have poor grammar or have mistakes in your input, it's going to lead to mistakes in the output. It kind of is in some ways a parrot, and it will parrot poor input. I like to encourage people to use structured format like bullet points and Markdown, because that gives it some structure, especially if it's a more complicated prompt, for it to understand what's most important and relevant, kind of give it an outline. I love to tell people to give it examples. Sometimes you'll see it called shots when you're reading about it, like multi-shot prompting. So tell it how you want it to answer, what format you want it to answer in, the kind of style or tone that you want to see from it or hear from it. That's really helpful. One that I also really encouraged, so Nikita Roy, who runs a podcast called Newsroom Robots, she encourages people to speak your prompt rather than writing it. So turn on that mic on your laptop or on your phone and just talk to your bot, which I think is a fun phrase. And also it makes a lot of sense to me. Prompts can be a lot more natural that way. It doesn't feel as arduous of a task to try to write it up because, chatbots are supposed to save you time. They're not supposed to, it's not supposed to be hard to get a good output out of it. Sometimes it is still hard to get output out of it. But if you're kind of using a conversational tone and you're able to say it as quickly as you could type it or even more quickly, that can be a really nice way to get a good output out of it. That's just scratching the surface, but those are some of the most basic prompt tips I would give.
Excellent. Thanks, Liam. Jasmine.
Yeah, wow, Liam, that was excellent. You really captured a lot of the finer mechanics of what I wanted to say. So I'll just share a couple of mental tricks that I use. The first, share your uncertainties. If I'm oh, help me understand what Keynes means when he's talking about animal spirits. Also throw in hey, I don't know anything about economics, right? So explain it, to someone who doesn't know anything about economics. And that really helps me get better answers. If I'm not certain about something, I think it really helps. And then it also allows for me to be wrong and have GPT understand that this is something I'm saying and it's not necessarily the truth. It is something that I'm also not sure about. Because otherwise sometimes it'll run off of what you're saying and be okay, that's our ground truth now, when it really, really shouldn't be. Another thing as well, I think, is remembering where these models come from. They're a reflection of the world that we live in and the training data that is captured in them. One thing that I think about a lot is uncertainty, because when a friend turns to me and says hey, do you know how to make guacamole? I either say yes, I do, which I do thankfully know because it's delicious, or I'll say, no, I have no idea. If I'm on Reddit, right, you only get the yes answers. People don't say no, I, egg lover 5000, don't know how to make guacamole. You just don't say anything. And so you'll notice that models can struggle with things like uncertainty because that's not something that's captured on the internet. Another example is something that might have to do with physical reality, so pain, right? We don't have great descriptions of that online, or even in film. You'll think of guys getting shot in the movies and you're that's probably not what that actually looks like, right? That's movie magic. And so I had a friend who was making this video game for his daughter, and a character would get shot with an arrow, in the stomach, and they'd be why did you do that? Which is, of course, not how a person would respond to being shot by anything, right? So I think it's really important to remember those limitations and where these models come from and what data is being captured and really what isn't as well.
Excellent, excellent information. Also, I love that Liam said use the mic. All right, we're going to go to an in-studio question here. If you can, say your name, where you're from, and what your question is. Thank you.
Hello. Sorry. Hello, my name is J.R. Tell, and I am an instructor at Illinois Media School in Rosemont. Outside of being an instructor in my personal life, I'm a writer, producer, director. The reason why that's important is because I use ChatGPT to kind of aid me along when it comes to writing scripts. And I know that there's this thing about using AI for screenplays and writing, and this can transfer over to as well as to news and media. My question would be, is there really some type of structure to crediting the AI when you are producing any written form content granted with what you guys just talked about, how you still want to give it the human element? And if there is, does that kind of impede or take away from the individual's own creativity because they're using these artificial intelligences to create content for them?
Excellent question. Jasmine, I think we should start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I'm pretty careful to keep things, quite early in the chain of exploration. So it's not something that usually makes it into the final product of my work. And also, if you have more questions about this, I believe Brian from Standards is here, and he is excellent. So good judgment there. Someone to consult later. But for me, I think I try to be very cautious, right? We still fundamentally have made this pact with our readers to give them news that they can trust and believe in. And I think it's really important that when I'm using AI, it's really only in the very early stages, and the final product is still something that comes fully from me. I think that is really imperative, just as a journalist.
I love that you're talking about Brian Caravellano, who's on our next panel too. So thanks for making that segue, and so for everybody to stay for that too. Liam, let's send it over to you.
Yeah, one thing that I've been having discussions about that's really fascinating to me is there ever going to be some sort of standardization of disclosure technique for AI work? And I'm mixed on that. It's kind of like, the FDA has they have certain standards on food or products, like this is 20% juice. Can you ever do that? Can you say this is 20% AI? I don't think so. We're going to be using AI in so many different ways, and it can be doing so many different jobs. We don't tell people that we use Google to assist in our reporting process either, and I think AI is just going to continue to be embedded in the research practices and production practices that we have. That it's really difficult to say. I do think if it's going to be educational for your readers or your listeners to tell them about a tool that you're working with, and that it could be valuable for them to understand where your product comes from and the values that it has and the values that you have in producing it, then it can't hurt. It probably can't hurt. It's not going to diminish the trust in the product to disclose a little bit of how you used it. I wouldn't say, sometimes you'll see at the bottom of news articles, for instance, like this news article was assisted by AI, and I think that's a less helpful thing to say because it doesn't tell you how it was used, and it might just kind of make it a little more confusing how that article is produced. But if you're able to give a little detail, a little context, and really point out the value of why AI was used there and what you did with it, I think a little bit of more disclosure is never a bad thing.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Liam. Thank you, Jasmine. Thanks for your questions. We're going to go to a virtual audience question. And this is Diego, and he's asking, with AI being largely prompt-based, how are foreign language speakers going to fare? Anybody with a heavy accent, and my husband and some of my family members, same situation. That's an excellent question. Do you want to start with that, Jasmine?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's a representation issue. So there are some languages that are a little bit better represented. I know Mandarin, Spanish, there's a decent amount of training data, but there are rarer languages too, right? So in China, there are many, many, many different dialects that you can speak in, and not all of them are going to be captured. And so this is a really, really big problem, because when we're generating text, it might not be reflective of, it might not be authentic, really, and it really might not be something that you want to rely on even at all, the way you might use GPT, to have a conversation about guacamole or something. So I think it is something that I'm very concerned with, and I think a lot of people are asking the same question.
Seen a little bit of that in Google Translate, for example. In Portuguese, they have Portugal and Brazil, two very different dialects. And to your point, Liam, you did speak about languages. If you want to touch on this question real quickly too, from Diego.
Yes. So I think first of all, I think it's getting better. I think a lot of the AI companies are recognizing this problem. It's an input challenge. It's a bias that it has from the training set, and it is working really hard to make this better. It's going to take time, but there's a lot of people working on improving it. But right now, I think it is absolutely a problem that it has. The less common the language is for instance, on the web or in libraries, textbooks, the harder it's going to be for the AI to come up with a good representative and thoughtful answer to a question.
Liam, while we have you up here, do you want to talk about how the American Journalism Project has customized ChatGPT to do different tasks?
Yes. So I think specifically, I would talk about one of our newsrooms, and when we're talking about translation on that subject, we're working with CPI, which is an investigative newsroom based in Puerto Rico. They want to reach English-speaking diaspora audience in the USA. So they want to take their Spanish articles and translate them into English. They used to use Google Translate. They did not like the quality of the translations, and the readers didn't either. So they just hired an English language editor, so it's coming with an audience strategy, and it needs to. It's not going to just work to translate and have it go. But I've been working with him to evaluate several translation tools, and ChatGPT actually rose to the top. That really was honestly surprising to me, and it was a really happy surprise because it can only get better from there. If the first prompt that we tried was kind of the highest quality one. So they experimented with 2 workflows, and they found that should ChatGPT make the first draft and then a human edits it, or should a human do the first draft and ChatGPT make the edit? They found that the first one, maybe not too surprisingly, they found the first one's working better. So right now they're having ChatGPT create the draft, and then he and other editors are working with it to make it as good as it can be. They have a dialogue a little bit with ChatGPT. And the goal there is to save some time for editors and to improve the quality of the translations. So we're still measuring, still tweaking, and trying to expand that prompt to make it as good as it can be, but it's a really promising start.
Promising indeed, thank you. We have to go to a virtual audience question, and this is from Chris Ann, who asks, how important is identifying AI-generated content as we get into election season? This has so many layers. I could talk about this for about 20 minutes. Jasmine, let's start with you.
Well, I think everyone can agree that it is incredibly important, so much so that we spend a lot of time. We have like this one channel and also a meeting where we talk about this. It's called Vote Watch. So we are thinking about this pretty seriously. It is really important. It's also really difficult just because, with the way the internet works and the ease of generating content with, tools like Claude or ChatGPT, we're now drowning in information. So it is an ongoing battle, but definitely a deeply important one.
Liam.
I second that. There's no shortcut, I think, at this point. AI cannot reliably identify AI. It can give you clues, but always, you always have to be working with these tools and as Jasmine said, just check your instincts too. If something seems a little off, there's a better chance that it is, and you should triple check it and quadruple check it. So I don't think there's any shortcut to just doing the hard journalistic work of identifying and looking for the falsities and making sure that you're not publishing anything that you haven't confirmed.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you, Jasmine. I have a question now. This is kind of personal, but I think it certainly applies here. As an adjunct professor, as my side hustle, I also teach journalism students. One of the things that I come across is I'm trying to find a way to segue, to find a way to make sure that students know, and I put this in the curriculum to some degree, that they know they can use it if they run into writer's block, for example. But then some will just take it to the nth degree, and whether I use a tool to find out that they've used AI to create their whole story or their assignment, what's the best way to kind of, I guess, homogenize the information so that everybody wins and students are actually learning?
Yeah, I think for me, again, it's about reminding them what they're losing when they're kind of outsourcing the work of thinking critically to a model. Ultimately, you are the one who, you're not learning, you're not thinking, and you're not, doing the important journalistic work that you will have to do when you're in this job. I was a data scientist before this. So, it's true across all fields. Ultimately, you need to be able to do things on your own without a model because you might lose internet connection, there might be a day where ChatGPT goes offline, and you still need to get through the day and be able to answer people's questions or analyze a data set without that tool. I was walking, with a student through some code that she'd written, and it became clear that she had generated much of it using, AI, and it was really hard because I was like, look at what you've lost. I'm like, why did you use this library? Why did you write this word here? And she couldn't explain it to me. And so how am I supposed to work off of that, right? We can't troubleshoot, and you haven't learned anything. And the final product, it doesn't work. And I think that's the kind of, learning experience that I share with other students where I'm like, hey, there are perils to this. You cannot outsource this to the internet or to tools. Like, you still need to be able to do it on your own.
And not only that, great points. And you also need to be able to vibe back and forth in person. We don't have phones up here, so you need to be able to ingest and translate, for a lack of a better word. Let's get to you, Liam. Same question.
Yeah, I think it can be really good for background information and simplifying complex topics, but it's far from a replacement from a good teacher. And it's it can be a side tutor or buddy for studying with you. But I agree. I think code is a really good example that Jasmine mentioned. That in my job, I had actually stopped coding for a few years because my job was more in leadership and other things. And then when I got back to coding, I think ChatGPT has been an incredible tutor for me, kind of getting me back into things, teaching me languages that I don't otherwise know. But I always keep it in the context of, first of all, I have a background in this already. I know the basics of computer science already, and that is why I know what I'm not learning when I'm using it to generate code. And I think if you have that perspective, once you have a little bit of expertise in a subject and know the context in which you're asking for help, it can be so valuable. But I think, in that sense, sometimes it's great to just tell ChatGPT who you are, what problem you have, and it can help you walk through it. So, but I would really hesitate to jump to it as a starting point when you're studying. I think if you're starting and then you get blocked, it can be great for that, but don't start with it
as your sole device, because that's not what it is. All right, we're going to go to audience questions. If anybody has any questions to ask of our panelists. And also, this is a great time to remind everybody that you can also submit questions virtually as well. We want to ask you some of the questions from those of you here in the room. We want to ask for a show of hands. But remember, this is a judgment-free zone. How many of you, are you ready? You know where this is going, have used ChatGPT for your homework? It's okay, judgment-free, nobody's taking notes. Okay, wait, no, just kidding. All right, that's good to know. That's a large majority, right? You can see that. How many of you have used ChatGPT to craft emails or even social posts? Is that real? Do you believe that, Jess? Okay, that's fair. Is that, you can put them high. So that's roughly half, right? And not just one time, but every so often, right? Jasmine, do you want to talk about how that number, when I first started teaching a few years ago, there was something like, I think the percentage was maybe 35 to 65% of, statistically speaking, students who are using it within the classroom. And I think that we can talk about how that's increasing maybe exponentially at this point.
Yeah, there was actually this paper that a team of economists wrote that came out pretty recently, and they found that a very significant portion of 18 to 64-year-olds are now using, AI tools like GPT or Claude on a pretty regular basis. And there was one line that was especially striking to me, where they said the pace of adoption is actually kind of growing at a clip that's even greater than the internet more generally. And that's pretty astonishing, right? The internet is something that I think right now we feel is pretty ubiquitous. So for something to be kind of taken up even quicker than that, that's really, really startling.
Specifically talking also about using AI in your social posts. We were just asking, and I think we got more people raising their hand for that. You notice it on Facebook, for example. It asks you, first question, you want to use AI here. You want to talk to that, you and Liam?
Sorry, I think I don't have a Facebook.
Okay, yeah, I'm aging myself here. What about like when they ask for that in different places, you can use this as an option. Now it's a prompt in many different places, not just Facebook.
Wow, that's incredible. I try to stay offline. I'm drowning in information, so I really prefer to not get more. But I have seen that. I think there are a lot of marketers who really want to push their product. No shame there. I really appreciate the hustle. I think that's definitely helped increase the uptake of this new technology, that there are a lot of people who are eager to get you to use it. And I think, again, we should ask why they're so eager for us to use it too. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, but I think that's definitely helped increase the rate of adoption.
Kind of a risk that we're all kind of willing to take, and if we're using it at all. Thank you, Jasmine. Liam, I'm going to send this virtual audience question over to you. This is from Isaiah. He asks, how can we balance AI's benefits with risks we just talked about, highlighted by some tech leaders and leadership? Liam, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think we don't know all the benefits and we don't know all the risks yet, and so we're continuing to evaluate. I think we have a lot to learn about what's out there, what is and isn't working. I think what I'm often seeing in dialogue about AI is it's going to save the world or it's going to destroy the world, and that comes from led by the tech industry talking about it that way. Often it's treated as a binary, and I think the reality in almost every situation, whether it was electricity or the internet or you name the big technological advancement, it's going to end up being a benefit in some ways and a risk and a problem in others. And so I think we're navigating somewhere in the middle, and I think that will continue to be true in terms of who it's going to benefit and what. I think we're going to all figure that out together. We're going to all learn together. Sometimes we'll be able to have influence on it, and sometimes we won't. I would say one thing I wanted to mention about the AI prompts that I think I agree in some ways that it can be a marketing tool for these companies to ask to kind of be a writing assistant. I do think there is some it gives some equality if English isn't your first language, or you just don't have great language skills and you want to sound professional or want to express yourself in a way that you have trouble with. It can be helpful for that. I don't think and that's a good example. It can also stop you from becoming a good writer. So I think there again, it's never binary. I think it's going to be good in some ways and a problem in others.
Fair. All right, Jasmine?
I think for me, the phrase that runs through my head is still situational awareness. Understanding the training data, of where a model comes from, what their limitations are. I think as things change, these are like pretty core principles that are constants and that you can lean on even as people are pushing out, like GPT 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, right? So trying to understand what data is being captured here, what's being left out, trying to understand who's selling it and why they might be trying to sell it to you. I think these are all things that anyone can do, and with pretty low kind of technological barriers to entry, to really understand how can I engage with this tool. Having that situational awareness and that intuition is really what I lean on, because there are new tools coming out every single day, and I need to learn how to use them. So I lean on these.
In our last panel, I heard somebody saying this is the least we're ever going to know about it. We're just growing and growing and learning and learning. That from the panel before us, and to both of your points, yeah, this is it. We're just going up from here. We're going to go to an audience question. Hello, good afternoon. Please introduce yourself, where you're from, and what your question is, please.
Hi, my name is Sydney. I am a student here at Columbia College. And my question was, as AI technology is still emerging, and as you said, we don't know a ton about it yet, who should journalists regard as an authority on how we should use it effectively and especially ethically?
Excellent, excellent question. We talk about this in my class. I know we talk about it as we're covering stories. I'll let you take that one, Jasmine.
Yeah, of course. So this is the answer that I think Joe would like me to give. Joe is my editor. It all starts with Joe Murphy, the data editor at NBC News. But that's not even really a joke. I'll bounce things off of him. I'm like, hey, does this seem like something where we could use, a third opinion? And sometimes he says no. This is a guy who has a lot of flight time in the journalism industry and has really honed those skills. So I think that's helpful. And when it comes to the tech industry, I would say there's really no single authority that I look to. I try to follow a lot of people who I think have pretty sound judgment, have pretty good critical analysis skills, try not to be too inflammatory, relatively neutral. I think those are things where even if you don't understand statistics or machine learning, you can kind of feel out for yourself, right? You're like, is this a person with good judgment? Would I be friends with them? Do I trust them? I think from there, that's kind of where we'll curate like a set of like 10, 20. I think in my list is actually up to like 100 different voices, and that's kind of where I get my information from. It's a lot of different people.
Liam, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, I second that. I think talk to others in the field. I think that consensus are slowly emerging. I think that it's been great to see AI literacy gradually increase among reporters, among editors and journalists around everywhere. So I think we are figuring this out as we go. Everyone is kind of building as we fly, or whatever the expression. Pick your expression there. And so I think single authorities. I don't think I wouldn't say I can point to any particular person who I would say I listen to and only that person, or listen to everything they have to say. But I do think we are seeing consensus emerging in some of the right ways and some of the challenging ways to use AI.
Thank you so much, Liam. Thanks, Jasmine. Also, I just want to add, like in a very basic, that's very broad in talking about where you go to, make sure that, and an excellent question as well, where you go to make sure you're getting the right information. I think even with local news, as a street reporter, there are some things that I can do. Somebody comes up and says, hey, I saw everything, I know exactly what happened. Really? Well, put out trick questions, I guess, so that I know, were they really here? Something that has been vetted and verified by police, for example, or the fire department. There are also some things that you just can't trade. They talked about personal experience, and for example, one of the things, if I'm showing up to a scene and there was a fire, there were 2 in a row. One was a pallet fire, and I could smell something that a computer can't do. No AI is going to be able to do this. I could tell the viewers, this is a fire that smells like this. The next day there was a battery and tire fire. Much different from the night before, but my assignment was tell how these 2 are just a block down the street from each other. Well, I could tell the first thing, something that a chatbot and nobody is going to be able to do unless they're there. So if you personalize it, to Liam and Jasmine's point, you have invited some information that a computer just can't do. They can, try and put a joke or have a chatbot do it, a joke, or ChatGPT. Have you tried it? Doesn't work that well. Not yet anyway, but as we said, everything, they're learning. And I want to go to one more question as we're wrapping this up. This is a virtual audience question. We have time for another one afterwards, I think. But Bethany from our virtual audience is asking, where can the AI beginner, we sort of touched on this earlier, go to start learning about AI? Let's start with you, Jasmine.
Sure, yeah. Honestly, I would just go to like the OpenAI website, or I'd go to the Anthropic website, sign up for an account, and just start asking whatever questions you want. You'll start to get an understanding of what these models know, don't know, what they can do, and can't do. So I think that's really helpful. Just any question at all, like should I get a dog? It'll start to kind of work through, like, hey, like here are some things you should consider, when you're trying to figure out if you get a dog. It's like, hey, like how do I make this fish recipe? And maybe it'll give you a recipe that doesn't work at all, like it's completely incorrect or not tuned to your needs. And you're like, oh, I want to bake it, like not cook it on the stove, or I have an air fryer and I don't have a pan, so I can't fry it. I think it really, just working with these tools in whatever easy, low friction way possible, I think that's really what helps the most.
Amazing. Liam, I'm sorry, I'm going to say goodbye. We're going to wrap this up. We're running out of time, but that was excellent, excellent information on both of your behalves. I hope that everybody got something out of this. Thank you so much. I know personally I've learned a lot, and it's all about you, though. So I said, let's give them a round of applause for everything they've given us.